Okay, so let's restart. So I think the question on infrastructure is fairly straightforward. Unfortunately, today we're going to be discussing capacity building and skills, and I have a feeling that's not going to have such straightforward answers. But anyway, we have at least the right experts to help us discuss it. So we have here Peter Zeil, who's from Spatial Services and who has been involved in many capacity building activities, such as Copernicus Hubs and Copernicus Academy. We have Danny Vandenbroucke, who's research manager at KU Leuven and has been the scientific coordinator of the EO4GEO project. And online we have, I hope, Mark Higgins from EUMETSAT, who is responsible for their user training activity. Once again, please, if you have any questions for the panelists, please do raise it on Slido and we'll fit in as many as time permits at the end of the session. So I think I'll start with Peter. So we heard this morning about the various ambitions that we have for using Earth observation in the various sectors. This now has to be followed through with the capacity that we have. So based on your experience in all of these projects, where would you see the likely problems arising in all of this?
Okay, thanks. In the first instance, I was quite impressed by the lineup this morning. I mean, there is a lot already been done to fulfill the expectations, yeah, I would say, with some great examples, yeah, raw materials, for example, because that's also my field, at least it was too. But the issues actually, I mean, in understanding the problems and the barriers, I would say one thing is the topic of the discussion which we just had. Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is people. And here, I think that what we think about this, or what we have in the context of this term capacity building, we need to be a little bit more concrete about this. What is actually meant by this? Yeah, and here I think that we have different levels. Yeah, we have education, which can be primary, secondary, tertiary education, academic, and so on. And on the other hand, we have skills development, which is not the same. Yeah, and here I think that maybe for that, what is now at stake, yeah, I mean, in this period now coming, yeah, is actually that our previous education was too academic and less applied. Yeah, and this is where I see the role of skills development actually to improve that. Yeah, but I mean, Danny will say a little bit more about this. I think in Europe we complain at a very high level. If you go to other areas, you see that there are more barriers actually and problems, which is not related necessarily to the ambition of the people who want to do something, but more from the circumstances they are in. Yeah. And here, I mean, in particular, institutional levels, the governance, which is a national responsibility to actually create environments where these capacity or skills can actually grow. This is where I would stop now. Yeah. Just with this little extension, actually, to look at the problem also on a global level.
Okay, thank you. Mark, you've dealt with this from a slightly different perspective from EUMETSAT. Does what Peter's describing fit with your experience from dealing with EUMETSAT's users?
Yeah, very much. Very much. Our heritage is weather and weather forecasting, and we've had an incredibly long relationship with the weather forecasting community, who are incredibly well educated towards our data. But that is not today. Today, the level of application, the breadth of application is enormous. And I think one of the themes I've heard as we talked about today is we would describe it as fitness for purpose. So making sure that people can get hold of the data that are the right data for their purpose. And I think when it comes to capacity building, so a lot of what I'm involved in is the skills development of people so they can use our data. And some of that is how to select the right data set, how to understand the quality of the data set, how to make a choice. Should you be using NDVI or FAPAR or something else? And these kind of things. We're involved at a lot of that level. But the other thing we're seeing is this shift in what we describe as the division of labor. So are there some things that we can take inside to our technology, which means that people need less skill to use our data, which then means a broader range of users are able to use our data, and we're more able to address the wider, we also talk about the user community, but of course there is no single user community, the communities out there of users.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Danny, maybe Peter already alluded to the fact that you were going to say more here, because you've been involved in the EO4Geo project, which was addressing issues like this, and I believe it's only just finished just recently. Maybe you could give us a short summary of the project and the key lessons learned there.
Well, I will not tackle all the lessons learned, because then we would need a lot of time. But just continuing on what has been said by Peter and the previous speaker, I think we saw from the very beginning, and the project is still running till the end of this month, but it's almost finished indeed, is we saw that there is quite an important gap between what is offered as academic training and education, or vocational training, lifelong learning, and so on, and the market needs and the development. So that was one of the important lessons learned. We need really to kind of monitor what is the requirement, what are the needs, what are new developments. Technology-wise and non-technology-wise, it's not only about the data and the technology, it's about many things, so it's quite complex. The ecosystem is complex. And so we should admit also at my university is that we sometimes run a little bit behind. That's one observation. We try to tackle that, or we want to further tackle that also in the future with EO4Geo. But the other thing is also, it has been mentioned by Peter, in fact, partially already, is that we should shift more from academic and theoretical education and training to more applied training. So what we have tried to do in EO4Geo is to do what we call case-based learning. So to start from real problems and there start using the data and the services, not only Earth observation data, but also geospatial and so on. And that's quite new, although it's already done in different universities, different organizations, but that's quite important and with some good results. And really there is a demand for doing that, but that requires to do the learning process in different ways. And I think that's another lesson learned from EO4Geo. We want to continue on that track. And if you combine both, then I think we can really deliver more appropriate training that is closer to activities of people. And that can be professionals in particular business processes, work processes, but it can be also at schools, so that children start learning to use the tools and some data in a simple way, of course, not a more advanced or complex questions, but at least to try to use it in their daily life.
Thank you. Mark, I'd like to come back on you on something that you just said just now, where you were talking about making things easier for users in order to reduce the need for them to really understand the details. I think two questions that come to mind from that. One is how far we can really push this approach, and whether at some stage you reach a need where they can't not know anything, they have to know something. And the other question I would have is, how much is this a sort of pushing down a balloon only for it to pop up in one place, where you're reducing the complexity to the users but requiring more effort behind the scenes in order to make that happen?
It's exactly that. I think one of the previous panelists expressed it nicely. At the end of the day, the value is created when somebody makes a decision or does something. And in order to do that, they will have been given a piece of information in their whole mix of information that they're using, which may contain some remotely sensed Earth observing remote data. And somebody may have been helping them, and so on into the ecology. And then eventually you get to somebody like us or one of the high resolution providers who's providing the data. And the more that we can do work that helps people to have access to data, the better. But that shift of division of labor comes at a huge internal complexity cost. And that's actually, it's something where we need to be very careful. So for example, we've experimented with making a data cube. We've done one for atmospheric composition and one for drought and vegetation monitoring. And we're trying to see how we can vary the nature of our data access mechanisms. However, when we do that, we make choices, and we need to be very careful of those choices and who were we consulting when we made those choices, because we quite often talk to the same old people. I mean, it's noticeable. So, we're a panel of all men, so we have a particular set of perspectives. And there will be people in the audience going, yes, I can say stuff too. And it's something we've noticed we really need to watch out for, making sure we're hearing the voices we don't normally hear. In our world, that means listening to people who are not meteorologists, and hearing people talk about the way they manipulate data who are not meteorologists. That's been a part of our journey over the last 5 years. And that's helped us to understand how better to frame and present our data. And this is going to be a whole thing. So I think the range of people that we need to be listening to, so we can understand when we make these curation choices, what have we really done, is going to matter. But the second part of your question is exactly right. It gets much harder inside our building. And that's part of my job has moved. I now have two parts to my job. One is training and capacity development, and the other one is helping understand the user environment and inform our data access mechanisms. And it's interesting that those have come together.
Danny, maybe I'll ask you to comment on that more from the Earth observation perspective. Do we have some clear processes in place in order to really understand that this is happening, where the real needs are, where the blockers are, where the capacity is needed in order to address this? Is there, if you like, an infrastructure in place in order to assess what the problem is?
To be honest, the real operational infrastructure to monitor this and to evaluate or to assess this is not yet in place. But let's say that in EUFGEO we started to study the current demand and the offer, the supply side. For example, in EUFGEO we described more than 1,100 training modules that are relevant in the Earth observation and the geospatial sector. So there's a lot out there. It's very dispersed. It's amongst different organizations, not only academia, but ESA and many other organizations. So there's a lot out there, but it's very difficult to find your way. And as I said before, it's very difficult to assess whether it's still in line with what is really required. So CDFOP, it's a structure of the EU, supports the idea of what we call a skills intelligence mechanism. So to continuously gather information about supply and demand. And in fact, in the long-term action plan in the sector skills strategy, because EUFGEO is a sector skills strategy blueprint project, in that strategy, we have defined for the long term to set up something that is continuously monitoring and evaluating what is the status. So we hope that there will be follow-up projects. There is already one under Horizon program. And there will be probably other calls to exactly do that, because the sector, well, we did a study in 2018 already, so it's out of date already. So we need to have new studies, to repeat it regularly, but also to monitor continuously. And therefore we seek collaboration with the Open Geospatial Consortium that is doing kind of tech trends watch systematically, that we could then use to evaluate what to integrate in curricula at universities and in vocational training. So that's, let's say, being done partially or in the plans. I think what is also necessary is that we also look to new ways of learning, new learning formats, but also new ways to transfer the knowledge and the skills. So basically, one of the ideas is to look into gaming, immersive visualization techniques. So to also not only to have the traditional ways of teaching, but also to find new ways for people to learn easier, better, in simpler ways. So also that is a kind of track that we have identified and that we want to explore in the future.
Peter, a question really about how we get all of these players involved, because we have to link all this to more general awareness raising activities in Earth observation, make people aware that there's an issue, get them involved in doing something about it. How do we involve all of these key players in their capacity development?
Yeah, that's a crucial question. A simple answer is that we try to speak the same language. That means what was mentioned already before, yeah, I mean, with the communities, yeah, I mean, to use certain things. And in many ways, it is the issue that the mutual understanding about an issue, yeah, and Danny has just mentioned that, yeah, I think this is a way to overcome these issues, and examples we have seen already this morning is actually to address a certain problem together. I mean, we have all sorts of nice words for this, co-design, co-working, and so on. Yeah, but the issue is that the one, let's say, who provides the technology understands the problem of a user. On the other way around, yeah, the user has to understand the limitation of the technology. Otherwise, it ends up in a disaster or not missed expectation. And I think from also what Danny said, I think that in Europe we are very well taken care of. Yeah? I know from my colleagues from the industry that they all say we don't get people and so on. Yeah, but I think in this transformation now, which has to happen from a purely scientific dealing with space, yeah, I mean, to operational issues. I think in this transition, yeah, I think that the project EO for Geo has actually put some fundamental things on the table, yeah, which can be followed up and implemented. Yeah. And in an international context, I think that, yes, in Europe, we have a lot to offer. And maybe in respect to the problems we have addressed, I mean, also from an industry perspective in the past, yeah, I mean, in this development now under Copernicus. But I mean, these things can be shared, yeah, on an international context, yeah. And I think there is a huge opportunity for Europe actually to get out and share this experience with others who are struggling with that. And I think the European companies here have a very good potential actually to do that.
Coming back to Danny for a minute, I mean, Peter mentioned there's some concrete actions coming out of EO4GEO. Maybe you could sort of tell us a bit more about the concrete actions that you think are needed, and maybe most crucially is who really should be taking the lead on those.
Maybe important to start to mention that we decided with the consortium that made up EO4GEO to continue the work after the project. And that's also linked to the strategy and long-term action plan. So DG DEFIS, who is kind of not the real sponsor because the EACA, but supporting at least the work, they really were very clear on this. We do not want a project that ends the last day of the project. So in that sense, we also calculate, we have developed a governance model, a business model to continue the work, because there is a real demand for that, and there is really also demand from the Commission side to do so. That said, we wanted and we started already to enlarge the alliance. That's called EO4GEO is an alliance with associated partners. We are currently the partners and associated partners together 75 organizations, already a mixture of academia, public sector bodies, private sector companies, and so on, associations. So that's basically the idea, to expand that, because even if it looks like education and training is straightforward, the ambition described in the strategy is very, well, it's huge. And over the next 10 years, a lot needs to be done, and it should be sustained. It's not one go, but you have to repeat things. So we need really a lot of a bigger network, more partners to be involved. And not only academic to be, I want to stress that. So the collaboration with the private sector is very important, and also with public sector. So the inclusiveness, the expansion of the network is quite important. And then the second thing that is very important is that we have some results from the project that can be used and reused by all. So we have this common vocabulary, common language, we call it the body of knowledge, in which we describe our sector, the Earth observation and geospatial sector, its concepts. It can be theories, can be methods, can be technologies, can be an application. So it's already described. We want to maintain that. That's our common vocabulary. We want to link it to other sectors like defense, automotive sector, maritime, and so on. So already there's an important step. But on top of that, we have developed a series of tools for supporting education and training, but also a little bit broader, so skills transfer. So just to give one example, we have a tool that allows you to prepare a job offer as a company, as a public sector, as an academic institution, using this common language to do it in a systematic, structured way. And then to, for example, if you receive for the job offer some CVs, to annotate the CVs and compare them. So there is an ecosystem of tools around it, Creative Commons, so anyone can use it and reuse it. And I think that will help to further develop skills, the reskilling, the rethinking also of what is necessary. So we think that these results are already there and are delivered already, but can be reused by anyone. And we want to stimulate also other organizations and also companies to have a look at it, and maybe to think about it, to really pick up these tools and this environment to support their work if they seek, for example, a new person in the company, or if they want to analyze needs regarding education and training.
I have a question which I'm sure is on the lips of many of the remote sensing companies out there. I'll put it to Peter in the first instance, but I would also like to get Danny and Mark to comment on it as well, which is that I'm sure everybody approves of everything we said about capacity building, but many companies will be saying, but at the end of the day, we need people and we need them now. So I think the question really is, are there any short-term actions that can be used to address immediate skills deficits that are practical in the near term?
I might not fulfill your expectations. For me, I mean, having been in kind of teaching environments of different kind, yeah, also in academia and so on, the issue is always to, if you are able to initiate a momentum in people, to attract them to something, yeah. And there are different ways to do that, of course, yeah. I mean, what you can do from your point of view, yeah, and if you are basically the instructor. The other thing is what happens on the receiving end. And here, a lot of things can happen, yeah. I mean, people follow your ideas and are similarly enthusiastic about what you do, and the others just sleep. So you have to deal with this kind of bandwidth very often. And I think on the short term is to support, of course, the institutions which actually do this type of job. Yeah? And this is in the academic sector, but also in the vocational training sector, as we find out. The other thing, what I think is also that my experience, especially now in this period of geopolitics, Europe has a lot to offer, and Europe is very attractive. And in particular, what their system of education is concerned. And not only in the academic sector, but also in the vocational sector. And I think this could be used. Europe can be open to people from outside to actually acquire these skills and capacities, yeah. If they stay here or if they come back to their country is a different thing, yeah. But I mean, they have gained something. And I think we have a situation where Europe can offer that. And I think that's the best thing you can actually do to invest in people. And here is an option, a very clear option. Yeah, I mean, nowhere else in the world you have this type of system that you have access to data and so on. Yeah. So I think there could be an advocacy for building capacity in Europe, because we are very well taken care of.
I'm actually going to put the same question to Mark as well. And what do you think are the things that can be done to address needs in the very short term?
Gosh, I mean, it's a tough question. I think, I mean, obviously there's some essential boundary conditions. Now is not a time to be a bad employer. If you're not being an inclusive employer, if you're not being a good employer, your skill will walk, and that's just a given. I think there's things like the EO for Geo activity that dramatically help. We probably in our world, in the big institution world, probably don't give them enough kudos and credit. So kudos and credit to you, because these interface activities that help move information, that help move all of the Jupyter notebooks that have got all of these embedded workflows in, that help people get quick started, they make a huge difference, and we can point people to these. I'm optimistic, although I don't have a fundamental solution to the challenge. I'm optimistic because we are living in a world that is taking its becoming at least increasingly aware of the environmental challenges, if not taking them much more seriously. We are seeing in the weather world a lot more people not do meteorology degrees, but they're doing environmental degrees because they want to have a broader awareness. In meteorology, that creates a particular problem. But that's okay because we can train people as they come in. But we're seeing dramatically more and more people undertake broad scale education in disciplines that relate to what we want to do. And that's a good thing, but that does not solve the short-term skills gap.
Yeah, Danny?
Yeah, maybe I want to add a little bit on the same topic. I think there is indeed not the abracadabra solution for everything. And there is always a kind of delay. People coming from the universities go in the companies, go in public sector bodies. They always have to learn when they start. But I think it can help to do more and to integrate better what is educated and trained at universities, for example, and the combination and the work together with companies and public sector should be intensified, and it can be done. For example, at our university, we have several courses that are kind of empty boxes, but that are internships so that students really can go on the job in a company for several months to work and to learn in real projects. And I think we should exploit that more because it's one, more fun for students. It's helpful for companies or for public sector bodies because in our case, many of those people later on go to the companies. So they have been working in the company for the project. They learned on the job, to say so. And I think it's not a solution for everything, but I think we should look more into that direction because that provides more flexibility and will focus more what is trained and educated at universities, for example, that it's closer to what companies are doing. And I think that's perfectly possible. I give just one example. We had a research project for SATSEN on border control using Earth observation techniques and machine learning and artificial intelligence. And out of that, we created new training material to be integrated in the curricula at university. So there is also a way for universities that usually are very slow, sorry for that, but it's the case, to set up a full new course, for example, takes ages, years, but you can sometimes integrate in existing courses new materials from real experiences. And I think when you do that more systematically, I think the education and the training is more relevant, but also it's more relevant for those that are doing the work at the end of the day, the companies and public sector bodies. So because you collaborate and you modernize training courses or modules or whatever, or vocational training based on real experiences. And I think that's quite important to do that more systematically.
Mark, coming back to you, where can the various institutions help? I mean, EUMETSAT obviously, but also others like ESA, like the new USPO. How can the institutions support this?
So we have our mandates. We need to play inside our mandate, but care about the wider world around us. I think making sure that we are connected to the interface activities, so things like EO4Geo, things like ESC, the people who move in the middle, because that's how we're going to hear where the challenges are. And there are some things that we can do that are inside our mandates. Sometimes not, but sometimes, we can provide training resources on certain topics. We can provide open training courses on certain topics. But in order to do that, we need to be aware of what is needed. And partly that's about us reaching out more, and interface organizations, different science groupings really make a difference in doing that. I think it's yeah, on a good day it works, and we all play together as a team. So I'm optimistic because I see it happening sometimes, not every day, and we can lift our every day so that they are better.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We've actually had quite a few questions from the audience while this is going on. All anonymous, unfortunately, so we can't go back to the people. Not sure we have time for them all, but I'll take a few of them at least. So one comment which, again, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking is there are millions of stakeholders. Each one has a different problem to resolve. How do we manage building the capacity for such a diversity of needs? I'm not sure who wants to take that one. It's a rather broad question.
I will try to kick off. What we have tried to do in EFGO is to think about kind of baseline education and training that can be used and reused, which is on Earth observation, space, geospatial, and so on. And indeed, then to tailor, especially for vocational training, I think that's important, starting from the baseline that exists and that's maybe needed for everyone, but then to tailor it and linking it to occupational profiles and the activities performed by those people. So I think it's true, it's every activity is different, the setting is different, the background is different. So I think we call it developing learning paths for certain profiles. For example, these profiles might be linked to air quality monitoring or other aspects, border control or whatever. And you start from real cases, the real activities, and there you can develop, let's say, packages, modules of training materials that is supporting certain profiles. And then if you want to go one step further, even you can tailor it to individuals, because every individual is separate, is different, different background, different CV, and then you can look into the existing CV, the background, the experience, and from there tailor also, for example, to develop certain learning paths and to develop a certain learning offer. But it's true, there is not, you can't say we develop one curriculum that fits for everyone or for every company. It must be thought about to really tailor it depending on what you are doing. And I think in EFGO we started to set up a methodology to do that, because it requires to analyze in particular what someone is doing in an organization, etc. So it requires another way of developing education and training.
The thing I would add to that is the ability to add reflective practice, helping people learn how to learn, but also doing networked learning and communities of practice is essential here, so that people are able to be connected to other people who are trying to learn a similar discipline, share knowledge, grow knowledge, and work in that kind of way.
Okay, thank you. An idea that was floated this morning by one of the evangelists, I'm sorry, I forget who, was this idea of a placement of EO experts. So I think the idea was to place them within the industry for a while. Under what conditions would that be feasible?
First, maybe to understand the question, placement of EO experts in the industry, in what, in the, let's say, energy, raw materials, or things like that? Or that could, yeah, that could maybe well be, yeah, I mean, if someone is open, yeah, an EO expert also has to have certain expertise actually to do that, yeah. I mean, if he is placed in an environment where basically he has to learn, yeah, he has to understand what the issues, what the problems are, to actually really be able to bring in his expertise. Yeah. So yes, I mean it sounds simple, but it is probably quite an experience for both sides. Yeah, I mean for the EO expert to be exposed to something where he is not an expert, and to the other side actually to talk to someone who is not, let's say, an agriculturalist, to actually communicate this problem. But this is exactly what I meant with this common language, and Danny also elaborated on this. Okay.
This may fit within the Marie Curie actions. There's a mechanism called RISE, which involves staff exchanges. So that may be one way of doing that, because it's something that the Marie Curie action tries to address broadly.
We're actually almost out of time, so I'm just going to take one final question before we wrap up, which is how we transfer the lessons from EO4GEO into the national perspective, because education by and large is a national task.
Yeah, one of the partners of EO4GEO is Nereus, so they focus more on the regions, maybe not the national level or the local and regional level. So we have already some experience in some of the countries to work with vet providers, with particular companies, with particular bodies, also because they were a member of the consortium, but also new ones, like for example in Sweden and in many other countries. Yeah, it's a challenge, I must say, because we are currently documenting what we call uptake of the results of EO4GEO internally, so the consortium itself, and outside the consortium. And there we see a lot of opportunities and there is a lot of requests, but it's not equal. It's not systematically done yet. But it's also part of this strategy and long-term action plan. So I think it's more work to be done, still to come. And it will be a real challenge to find the right connection point in the different member states. So we were looking into the Copernicus Fora that exist in many countries, not in all countries, but in many countries, to work with them because they know the local scene better. So, but that will be a challenge to reach out and to connect to the right organizations and people. But yeah, we will try to do that. It's very important to translate that at the national level and at the regional level.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we're out of time. There are still quite a lot of questions that we haven't answered. Maybe we can try to address some of them bilaterally in the coffee break. But for now, I think I just thank all the speakers. And I think coffee, what more can be said? Thank you.